Good morning, everyone. Today, I want to talk to you about something deceptively simple but profoundly powerful, how you should begin every week. And I'm not just talking about routines or to-do lists. I'm talking about designing the neurochemical foundation that will determine your motivation, clarity, and productivity not just on Monday, but across your entire week. You see, we often think of motivation as something that either shows up or doesn't. But that's not how the human brain works. Motivation is not a mood, it's a neurobiological process, and you can control it. In fact, the way you start your week sets the tone for your dopaminergic system. That's the system responsible for drive, focus, and reward anticipation. When you understand how to activate this system deliberately, the week doesn't just happen to you, you take control of it. Today, I'm going to walk you through a science-supported framework that will allow you to begin each week with the clarity of intention, the physiology of energy, and the mindset of resilience. We're going to leverage neuroscience, behavior design, and a few key protocols that are as simple as they are powerful. When we talk about optimizing how we begin each week, one of the most overlooked yet profoundly impactful elements is exposure to early morning sunlight. This isn't just a wellness tip, it's a foundational practice grounded in neuroscience. Getting sunlight into your eyes within the first 30 to 60 minutes after waking up is perhaps the single most powerful lever you can pull to align your brain and body for alertness, focus, and long-term mental health. It sets the tone not only for your day, but for your entire week. The reason early morning light is so crucial has everything to do with how our circadian rhythm works. The circadian rhythm is an internal 24-hour clock that governs virtually every physiological system: your sleep, your hormones, your mood, your metabolism, even your immune response. At the core of this system lies a group of neurons in the brain known as the suprachiasmatic nucleus, SEN, located in the hypothalamus. The SNEN acts as the master clock, and its primary input is light, more specifically natural light from the sun. When light enters your eyes, it passes through a specific set of cells in the retina known as intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, IPRGCs. These cells are not involved in vision. Rather, they are specialized for detecting ambient light and sending that information directly to the SNEN. The SNEN then uses this light input to set your body's circadian clock, essentially sending a message to every cell in your body: it's time to be awake now. This triggers a cascade of biological events. Cortisol levels begin to rise in a healthy, natural way, not the kind of spike associated with stress, but the baseline rise that helps promote alertness and focus. This morning cortisol pulse is critically important. It anchors your energy levels for the day and also determines when melatonin, the sleep hormone, will begin to rise later in the evening. So, by getting bright, natural light in your eyes early in the day, you're essentially creating a reliable rhythm. Your brain knows when to be alert and when to wind down. But the benefits don't stop there. Morning sunlight also plays a key role in dopamine regulation. Dopamine is a neuromodulator involved in motivation, pleasure, reward anticipation, and goal-directed behavior. Studies have shown that sunlight exposure increases the availability of dopamine in certain brain regions, which can significantly improve mood, focus, and overall drive. This means that if you consistently get sunlight in your eyes early in the day, you're not just regulating your sleep, you're also enhancing your capacity to stay motivated and goal-oriented. It's also worth noting that the specific type and intensity of light matter. Indoor lighting, even from bright artificial sources, does not have the same effect as natural sunlight. On a cloudy day, outdoor light can still be many times more intense than the strongest indoor bulbs. The IPRGCs in your eyes are specifically tuned to detect the blue light spectrum found most abundantly in morning sunlight. This is why going outside rather than just opening a window or turning on a light is essential. Ideally, you want to get at least 5 to 10 minutes of direct sunlight exposure to your eyes within the first hour after waking. If it's cloudy or you're in a region with low sunlight, aim for 15 to 30 minutes. You don't need to stare at the sun. In fact, you shouldn't up being outside and facing toward the general direction of the sun is enough. And no, sunglasses are not recommended during this period unless you have a medical reason to wear them, because they can significantly reduce the light intensity reaching those retinal cells. For people who wake up before the sun rises or live in environments where morning sunlight isn't available, a bright light therapy box that emits at least 10,000 lux can be a good alternative. These are often used in clinical settings to treat seasonal affective disorder, but they can also help shift and stabilize your circadian rhythm when used consistently in the morning. This practice becomes even more powerful when paired with consistent wake-up times, which further strengthens the circadian signal. Irregular sleep and wake times can disrupt this system and make it more difficult to achieve that optimal cortisol and dopamine rhythm. So by anchoring your day with early sunlight, you're not just improving one morning, you're actually training your nervous system to show up more consistently and energetically every single day of the week. Early morning light exposure is a simple behavior, but it has a disproportionate effect on how we function cognitively and emotionally. It's not about motivation in the abstract sense, it's about creating a biological state that supports high performance and resilience. Movement is one of the most direct and effective ways to shift your brain and body into a state of heightened alertness and focus, especially at the beginning of the week. From a neuroscience perspective, physical activity isn't just about burning calories or building strength, it's a powerful neuromodulatory tool that primes your entire nervous system for action. When you engage in movement early in the day, particularly in the first few hours after waking, you're initiating a cascade of neurochemical events that directly impact your levels of dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine, three key players in motivation, focus, and mental energy. Dopamine is especially important here. Often misunderstood as simply the pleasure molecule, dopamine is better understood as the molecule of motivation, drive, and pursuit. It is what allows you to lean into challenges, maintain effort, and derive satisfaction from progress. What many people don't realize is that physical movement, especially deliberate, rhythmic movement like walking, light jogging, cycling, or even mobility work triggers a release of dopamine in brain regions like the striatum and prefrontal cortex. These are the areas involved in planning, focus, and goal-oriented behavior. When you move your body, particularly early in the day, you're essentially signaling to your brain, it's time to engage, it's time to move forward, it's time to pursue. But dopamine doesn't act in isolation. Movement also increases levels of norepinephrine, which enhances alertness and focus, and epinephrine, adrenaline, which prepares your body to take action. This combination is potent. It creates a neurochemical environment in the brain and body that supports high performance, sharp thinking, and emotional resilience. What's more, these effects are not just acute. Regular morning movement has been shown to create longer-term adaptations in the brain, including increased sensitivity to dopamine and other neuromodulators, which means that over time, you're actually training your brain to be more responsive to motivation and reward cues. Movement also has a direct impact on the autonomic nervous system, particularly the balance between the sympathetic, alert, action-oriented, and parasympathetic, rest, recovery branches. Early day movement promotes a healthy regulation of the sympathetic system, what we often refer to as getting into gear. This is crucial for setting the physiological tone for the day. If you start the day without activating your sympathetic system, you may feel sluggish, unmotivated, or dysregulated. Engaging your body physically provides the somatic signal to your brain that it's time to activate, time to focus, time to produce. Interestingly, the type of movement doesn't need to be intense to have this effect. While high-intensity training can certainly amplify the release of neuromodulators, even light movement, like a 10-minute brisk walk, can begin to shift your state. The key is intentionality and consistency. When you use movement strategically as part of your Monday routine, you're not just moving your body, you're tuning your brain. You're setting up the week with a neurochemical profile that supports effort and engagement rather than lethargy or procrastination. There's also a valuable interplay between movement and cognition. When you move, especially in ways that involve coordination and balance, such as dynamic stretching, yoga, or certain forms of functional training, you're engaging the cerebellum and motor cortex, which also communicate with the prefrontal cortex. This crosstalk between brain regions helps sharpen cognitive performance, including problem solving, working memory, and even creativity. This is why many people report that their best ideas often come during or just after exercise. It's not anecdotal, it's deeply embedded in how the brain processes information during and after physical movement. Early movement serves as a behavioral anchor. From a psychological standpoint, starting your week with movement is a form of early accomplishment. It's a small, controllable win that reinforces a sense of agency. This early success has a ripple effect. It boosts self-efficacy, increases positive mood states, and enhances the likelihood that you'll engage in other high-agency behaviors throughout the day and week. This is a classic example of what's called the keystone habit effect. By establishing one positive behavior early in the day, especially one as biologically potent as movement, you increase the odds of cascading success across multiple domains of life: focus, nutrition, productivity, emotional regulation, and beyond. From a hormonal standpoint, morning movement helps regulate cortisol, which naturally peaks in the early hours after waking. Movement amplifies this natural cortisol rhythm in a healthy way, promoting wakefulness and reducing stress sensitivity later in the day. A well-timed cortisol pulse supported by movement can buffer you against the negative effects of stress and improve your resilience in the face of challenges. You're not suppressing stress, you're training your body to respond to it more effectively. This is crucial, especially on Mondays when psychological stress and task demands tend to spike for most people. Beginning your week with a small, deliberate win is one of the most powerful ways to engage your brain's motivational circuitry. This isn't just about productivity or feeling good, it's about how the brain actually responds to achievement, progress, and the perception of forward movement. In neuroscience, we know that the dopamine system is highly sensitive to a sense of progress, and even small wins can create significant shifts in brain chemistry that set the tone for your entire day and week. The key is to select a task that is achievable, time-bound, and clearly define something that signals to your nervous system that you are in motion, that action is being taken, and that momentum is building. Dopamine, the molecule most associated with motivation and drive, is released not just in response to big accomplishments, but in anticipation of, and in response to even the smallest signs of progress. When you start your week with a small win, something as simple as making your bed with care, completing a 10-minute breathwork session, organizing your workspace, or writing down your top priority for the day, you trigger a small but meaningful release of dopamine. That release doesn't just feel good, it reinforces the behavioral pattern, making it more likely you'll repeat that behavior or another productive behavior soon after. This is because dopamine operates on a feedback loop. It rewards actions that move us closer to our goals and increases the likelihood we'll keep pursuing them. From a systems neuroscience perspective, this process involves the mesolimbic dopamine pathway, particularly the ventral tegmental area, vita, and nucleus accumbens. These brain structures are responsible for evaluating rewards and predicting outcomes. When you accomplish something, no matter how small, this system lights up, essentially telling your brain, this direction is good, keep going. It's not the size of the achievement that matters most, it's the sense that progress is being made. And the earlier in the day and the earlier in the week you can create this signal, the more you shape your motivational baseline for the days to come. There's also a behavioral psychology concept known as the success spiral. When a person experiences success in one area, even a small one, it increases their belief in their ability to succeed in other areas. This is tightly linked with what's known as self-efficacy, the belief in one's ability to take action and influence outcomes. When you start your week with a small win, you're not just changing your chemistry, you're changing your identity narrative. You're reinforcing a self-image of someone who takes initiative, who finishes what they start, who is capable of progress and growth. This shift in identity creates a foundation of confidence and forward energy that can ripple throughout your week. Crucially, the win must be deliberate. It's not about accidental success or checking off an easy task without attention. The act of intentionally choosing a small goal and following through is what signals agency to the brain. Agency, the perception that you are in control of your actions and their outcomes, is one of the most powerful psychological forces linked to sustained motivation and mental health. The brain thrives on perceived control. When you begin the week by intentionally directing your energy toward a specific goal and achieving it, you're reinforcing this internal locus of control. This is particularly important in a world where external demands and distractions often threaten to fragment attention and derail momentum. From a learning and neuroplasticity standpoint, small wins early in the day and week reinforce what's known as Hebbian learning. Neurons that fire together wire together. When you repeat a pattern of setting and achieving micro goals, you are literally reshaping neural pathways to favor behavior that supports motivation, consistency, and self-discipline. Over time, this process creates structural and functional changes in the prefrontal cortex, your brain's executive center, making you more adept at goal setting, emotional regulation, and sustained effort. This isn't just about feeling motivated on Monday, it's about training your brain to become the kind of brain that performs well under pressure, that resists distraction, and that thrives in pursuit of purpose. It's also important to note the emotional regulation benefits of early wins. Dopamine does more than increase motivation, it also acts as a buffer against stress and negative effects. When dopamine is elevated, your brain is more likely to interpret challenges as opportunities rather than threats. So, when you start your week with a win, you are preloading your system with a kind of neurochemical resilience. The things that might have felt overwhelming or anxiety-provoking will feel more manageable. You're not just pushing yourself forward, you're raising your baseline capacity to handle the complexity and unpredictability of the week ahead. Another benefit is that these early wins provide a foundation for habit stacking. Once your brain has experienced a win, it becomes more receptive to the next behavior, especially if it's linked in time or intention. This allows you to build momentum in a strategic way. For instance, completing a brief workout may lead naturally into focused work, which may then transition into a clear nutritional decision. Each of these micro wins builds on the last, creating a compounding effect of success and motivation. The more intentional you are about this process, the more powerful the cumulative effect becomes. Avoiding dopamine hijackers, particularly in the first hour of your day and week, is critical for maintaining focus, drive, and clarity. Dopamine is a key neuromodulator that regulates motivation, anticipation, and goal-directed behavior, and the way you manage it early in the day has downstream effects on your performance and mood across the rest of the day, and even the entire week. The modern environment is filled with opportunities to spike dopamine artificially through social media, notifications, rapid scrolling, email checking, and other high-stimulus digital interactions. While these activities may feel satisfying in the moment, they can significantly disrupt the brain's natural reward system and undermine long-term motivation. When you wake up and immediately reach for your phone, your brain is being bombarded with novelty. Novelty is a powerful driver of dopamine. Every new piece of content, like a message, a trending topic, creates a small but significant spike in dopamine. The brain registers these micro rewards as hits, reinforcing the behavior and making you more likely to repeat it. However, the problem lies not in the dopamine release itself, but in the unnatural frequency and intensity of those releases. The more often you engage in rapid, dopamine-dense behaviors, especially without effort, the more you train your brain to seek easy rewards rather than pursue effort-based goals. This reduces your sensitivity to the slower, deeper satisfaction that comes from deliberate work, learning, and creation. Neuroscience research has shown that the dopaminergic system adapts based on use. This means that when dopamine is released too often from low-effort, high-reward behaviors, the receptors in the brain start to downregulate. The effect is a kind of dopamine desensitization. You need more stimulation to feel the same level of motivation, and the things that used to feel rewarding, like meaningful progress, reading, working on long-term goals, or engaging in deep work, start to feel dull. This is why many people feel a sort of motivational crash by mid-morning or midday if they've spent the first hour of the day scrolling or consuming fast, fragmented content. The brain has already consumed more stimulation than it can effectively process, and its ability to generate internal motivation has been compromised. From a neurochemical standpoint, this has to do with baseline versus peak dopamine levels. Peak dopamine refers to those moments of high stimulation when dopamine surges. Baseline dopamine refers to your resting level, the stable state that determines how much motivation you feel in the absence of new stimuli. When peak levels are pushed too high too quickly, the brain compensates by lowering the baseline. This is why people often feel a dip in energy or mood after engaging in dopamine-heavy behaviors. If you start your Monday morning with a flood of digital stimulation, you may feel energized temporarily, but your brain's capacity to stay engaged with lower stimulation, effortful tasks will be reduced for hours or even the rest of the day. This is especially important on Mondays because the beginning of the week is when people tend to be most psychologically sensitive to structure, identity, and intention. The choices you make in that early window serve as behavioral cues to your nervous system. If you start with impulsivity, reactivity, and scattered focus, you're training your brain to operate in that mode for the rest of the day. If you delay dopamine hijackers and start with intention, reflection, or physical action, you're strengthening the neural circuits responsible for executive control, long-term planning, and effortful pursuit. Delaying digital stimulation early in the day is not about deprivation, It's about protecting and optimizing your brain's natural dopamine rhythm. The dopamine system is designed to motivate action toward meaningful goals through effort. When you allow space in your morning for effort-based dopamine release through movement, structured planning, reading, or even quiet reflection, you're aligning your behavior with the way the brain evolved to work. You're preserving dopamine for activities that involve pursuit and reward prediction rather than consuming artificial highs. There's also a psychological cost to early digital stimulation that goes beyond neurochemistry. When you check messages, scroll feeds, or dive into email first thing in the morning, you immediately place yourself into a reactive state. Your brain shifts from proactive goal pursuit to reactive task management. This change impacts the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for executive function, decision-making, and emotional regulation. In a reactive state, your attention becomes fragmented, your stress response is more easily triggered, and your ability to sustain deep focus is reduced. By avoiding dopamine hijackers, especially in the first hour, you maintain a higher degree of cognitive sovereignty. You retain control over where your attention goes and why. The act of delaying digital stimuli also strengthens what's known as top-down control, the brain's ability to override impulses in favor of long-term goals. Every time you resist the urge to check your phone or scroll, you are reinforcing the neural circuitry involved in self-regulation. This is a compounding effect. Over time, your capacity to delay gratification increases, your tolerance for boredom improves, and your threshold for meaningful effort rises. This directly translates into better performance, clearer thinking, and a stronger sense of agency throughout the week. This practice can serve as a filter for prioritization. By creating a digital-free buffer at the start of your week, you give your mind the space to clarify what actually matters. You're not immediately caught in the noise of other people's demands or the chaos of the online world. Instead, you're operating from a place of clarity and self-directed focus. You're giving your brain a chance to determine its own goals rather than being hijacked by the algorithmic agendas of apps and platforms. Deliberate stillness at the start of the week is one of the most underutilized, yet neurologically powerful practices for sharpening mental clarity, resetting emotional tone, and establishing a high-functioning internal state. In a world that celebrates speed, reactivity, and perpetual productivity, choosing to engage in purposeful silence and physical stillness sends a strong regulatory signal to the nervous system. It tells your brain and body that you're in control, that there is no immediate threat, and that you're creating space for intention rather than reacting out of habit. This has direct effects on brain function, stress hormones, and overall psychological state. The human nervous system is constantly scanning for cues of safety or danger, a process known as neuroception. This process operates below conscious awareness and is deeply influenced by physical states. Rapid movement, constant noise, and fragmented attention can signal threat or unpredictability, even if nothing explicitly dangerous is happening. Stillness, on the other hand, especially when done intentionally, has the opposite effect. It cues safety. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, particularly the vagus nerve, which governs rest, digestion, and recovery processes. When the vagus nerve is activated through breath control, posture, and non-reactivity, a cascade of calming neurochemicals like acetylcholine and serotonin is released, quieting the stress response and shifting the brain into a more integrated and resourceful state. From a cognitive neuroscience perspective, deliberate stillness supports what is known as interoception, the brain's ability to sense the internal state of the body. When you sit still, close your eyes, breathe slowly, and observe your internal sensations without judgment, you're strengthening the connection between the brain's insular cortex and the rest of the body. This connection is essential for emotional regulation, intuitive decision-making, and overall well-being. The better your brain can sense the state of your body, the more effectively it can respond to challenges without overreacting. This kind of embodied awareness is not abstract. It has measurable effects on cortisol levels, heart rate variability, and prefrontal cortex activity, all of which are foundational to high performance under pressure. Another powerful effect of stillness is its impact on the default mode network, DEAM, a set of interconnected brain regions that becomes active during introspection, memory retrieval, and internal narrative construction. When you're still and silent and not focused on any external task, the DEAM becomes more active. This is the network responsible for long-range planning, sense of self, and perspective taking. While often misunderstood as a source of distraction, the DEAM, and when used consciously, allows for integration of experiences, creative insight, and alignment of short-term behavior with long-term goals. Starting your week with even a few minutes of intentional stillness gives this network space to process, reset, and reorganize your mental models. This practice also trains what is known as metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking. When you're still and your mind inevitably begins to race or wander, you have a rare opportunity to observe those patterns without needing to act on them. You see the thought, label it, and return to your breath or your internal awareness. This strengthens the neural pathways between the prefrontal cortex and subcortical regions like the amygdala, which modulates emotional reactivity. Over time, this leads to a more stable mental landscape. You become less likely to get pulled into cognitive loops, less reactive to distractions, and more capable of sustained focus. This is crucial for setting a strong neurological foundation for the rest of your week. Intentional stillness enhances what is referred to as attentional control, the ability to choose what you focus on and for how long. This is a skill, not a trait, and it is trainable. Beginning your week with stillness is like a neural warm-up. You're rehearsing the process of directing your attention intentionally, returning it when it strays and sustaining it, even in the absence of novelty or stimulation. This directly translates to your work, relationships, and creative efforts throughout the week. Your ability to engage deeply and ignore distractions becomes stronger, not because you are trying harder, but because you have trained the underlying systems responsible for attention. There is also a hormonal regulation component to stillness. When you sit quietly and breathe deeply, you're shifting the balance between cortisol and oxytocin. Cortisol is the hormone associated with stress and alertness, while oxytocin is associated with trust, connection, and relaxation. In the absence of noise, input, and movement, oxytocin levels tend to rise slightly, creating a felt sense of calm and connection even when you're alone. This has the effect of softening the edges of the mind, reducing cognitive rigidity, and increasing psychological flexibility. Psychological flexibility, in turn, is one of the strongest predictors of long-term mental health and resilience. Stillness at the start of the week can also serve as a form of identity alignment. In the absence of noise and external demands, you have a clearer channel to reflect on who you are becoming, what you value, and how you want to show up in the world. This isn't about affirmations or forced positivity. It's about accessing an honest, unfiltered internal space where clarity arises naturally. You're not filling the space with goals. You're allowing your nervous system to settle so that real intention can emerge from a grounded place rather than a reactive one. The insights that arise during stillness tend to be more integrated, less compulsive, and more connected to your deeper sense of self and purpose. In the first part of the week, especially Monday morning, has a profound effect on both your mental state and your physiological readiness to perform. From a neuroscience and physiology perspective, physical movement, whether it's a walk, light mobility work, or a full workout, primes the brain for focus, enhances mood through specific neuromodulators, and resets the internal systems that govern energy, attention, and emotional stability. The body is not separate from the mind, and movement is one of the fastest and most reliable ways to shift the brain into a state that is alert, resilient, and prepared to engage with complexity. When you move your body early in the day, you activate a host of beneficial neurochemicals. One of the primary systems that gets engaged is the catecholamine system, which includes dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. These chemicals increase alertness, focus, and motivation. In particular, dopamine plays a key role in driving goal-directed behavior. Movement, especially when it involves effort and challenge, increases dopamine receptor density in the brain over time, making your brain more responsive to rewards and less susceptible to the kind of emotional volatility that comes from low dopamine states. This is especially important at the start of the week, when many people face a psychological resistance to re-engaging with structured tasks or responsibilities. Another significant factor is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BENF, which is often referred to as fertilizer for the brain. Movement stimulates the release of BENF, particularly in the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex areas involved in memory, learning, and executive function. BENF enhances synaptic plasticity, meaning it helps your brain form new connections and reinforce useful patterns. A short, vigorous session of movement on Monday can therefore increase your capacity to learn, adapt, and retain new information throughout the day and the rest of the week. Physical movement also affects the balance of autonomic nervous system activation. The sympathetic nervous system responsible for mobilizing energy and readiness is engaged through movement. But unlike chronic stress, which dysregulates the system, intentional movement provides a controlled activation followed by a recovery period. This controlled oscillation between effort and rest increases your nervous system's flexibility. You become better at transitioning between states of deep focus, alertness, and recovery. This adaptability is crucial in a modern work environment where switching between tasks, managing emotional challenges, and maintaining cognitive flexibility are daily requirements. Morning movement also influences your circadian rhythm, the internal clock that governs sleep-wake cycles, hormone release, and metabolic function. Exposure to natural light during outdoor movement in the early hours of the day reinforces the timing of cortisol and melatonin release, making you more alert during the day and more likely to experience restful sleep at night. This circadian anchoring is critical for long-term energy management and emotional regulation. When your circadian rhythm is aligned through early movement and light exposure, you reduce the risk of mood disturbances, fatigue, and brain fog. There's also a psychological architecture that forms when you move early in the week. You're creating a felt sense of momentum, a signal to your body and brain that action is being taken, that energy is being generated internally, not just consumed from external sources. This sensation of momentum reduces feelings of helplessness or inertia, which are common at the start of the week when the cognitive load feels high. Physical action reduces cognitive friction. It brings you into the body, out of ruminative thought loops, and into the domain of agency. Movement gives you access to the part of your mind that is action-oriented, not reactive, and it gives your nervous system a reference point for what strength, resilience, and activation actually feel like. Importantly, the type of movement doesn't need to be complex or exhaustive. Even 10 minutes of mindful walking, mobility drills, or bodyweight exercises done with presence and breath control can stimulate the same neurochemical cascades that enhance cognition and emotional tone. What matters most is that the movement is intentional and performed with awareness. You are not just moving the body, you are signaling to your nervous system that it is safe to activate, to engage, and to perform. That signal becomes a kind of template that the rest of your day and week will follow. This practice also helps to regulate inflammation through hormonal and metabolic shifts. Movement increases the circulation of anti-inflammatory cytokines, improves insulin sensitivity, and supports cardiovascular function. These physiological shifts influence the brain's ability to maintain a clear, stable signal amidst environmental noise. Inflammation is not just a physical issue, it affects cognition, mood, and attention. By moving your body, you're reducing systemic inflammation, which improves the clarity of your thinking, the sharpness of your attention, and the stability of your emotional state. There is a sense of alignment that comes from syncing your physical energy with your mental intention. When you move with purpose early in the week, you're not just preparing your body for activity, you're tuning your entire system to the rhythm of forward momentum. You're reinforcing an identity as someone who initiates action, who takes care of their vessel, who sets the tone rather than waiting for it to be set by circumstances. This coherence between mind and body is not abstract, it is a lived experience that feeds back into how you think, feel, and show up for the challenges and opportunities ahead.